This video is an introduction to making decisions in Java programming using if and if-else statements. Here are our learning outcomes for this week's topics. Identify the three fundamental control structures. We want to understand the importance of the selection control structure and correctly choose and code the if in a problem solution. We want to be able to correctly choose and code the if-else for a multiple alternative selection. Before diving into the textbook and details of coding, let's step back and examine the context of making decisions in terms of programming logic. Here are the three fundamental control structures provided by all programming languages. Sequence. We want to do a step-by-step ordering of the instructions that need to take place. Selection allows us to make decisions about whether or not to execute code at all or to choose between alternatives. And repetition allows us to repeat sets of instructions many times. Here is a pictorial representation of these three control structures. Programmers and software engineers frequently use diagrams and graphical representations of what the code will do. They help us picture the flow of the instructions that will be executed. Let's take a closer look at them. The sequence. We identify the step-by-step processes that need to be completed. The ordering of these statements is important. Each rectangle represents a process or statement, and the arrows indicate the order of the statements. We work from top to bottom and from left to right in our picture graphs. Selection or decision. Notice the diamond-shaped box. This represents a decision point. We will evaluate some type of condition, and if it's true, then we will do certain statements in the code. If it is not true, we will skip over those statements in the code. The third is repetition. Again, notice the diamond shape. It's a decision point that has to be considered. If the condition is true, then we are going to do a certain set of statements. And then we will check the condition again. And if it remains true, we repeat those statements. We repeat those statements until that condition becomes false, at which point we go around the statements that are listed to be done with the loop. Here is the basic syntax of the if statement. We need to use the keyword if. It's a Java reserved word, and it lets Java know that we're going to be making some type of decision or selection. We follow that with the left paren, and inside the parentheses we put some type of Boolean expression. That's the condition. If that condition is true, then we are going to execute the statements associated with the if condition. The condition must be a Boolean expression, which means it must evaluate to either true or false. If the condition is true, the statement is executed. If it is false, then the statement is skipped. There's some other terminology that is frequently used when we're talking about if statements. You may come across the term branching or conditional statements. So if a condition is true, we're going to do something. Here are two examples of Java code that use if statements. If the cookie count equals 0, then we're going to print a message, "Who ate all the cookies?" If time for lunch is true, then we'll print the message, "Let's eat." Both of these have Boolean expressions. The first one is checking integer cookie count to see if its value is now 0. The second one is testing a Boolean variable Is the time for lunch variable equal to true? We can use our relational operators, and we can combine different conditions with the relational operators and the logical and, or not operators. Here is the if-else statement. This is when we have alternatives. If a condition is true, do something. Else, do something different. If the cookie count equals 0, put cookies on the shopping list. Else, eat a cookie. Let's compare the if-else to the if. The logic is a little bit different, and we can see that in the picture. For an if-else statement, if the condition evaluates to true, we're going to do one set of instructions. But if it evaluates to false, we're going to do a different set of instructions. For the if statement, if the condition evaluates to true, we do the statements. If the condition is false, we don't do anything. We just move on to the next section of code. Here is another if-else statement. We have two integers, num1 and num2, declared, and have initial values of 60 and 30. This if statement compares num1 to num2. It asks the question, is num1 greater than num2? If that condition is true, then we print out the message, the value of num1 is greater than the value of num2. If it is not true, then we print out the value of num1 is not greater than the value of num2. So what would be output from this code based on the fact that num1 has a value of 60 and num2 has a value of 30? Did you get it right? Good for you. Here we introduce a little more checking of our num1 and num2. Now we could alter this program and let the user type in values for num1 and num2. That would make this a little more interesting. But for now, we're focusing on the if-else logic. So here we really want to get a little more information about num1 and num2. Whether num1 is greater than num2, then we will print that message out. Else, if num1 is less than num2, then we will print out the message, the value of num1 is not greater than num2. Else, if num1 is not greater than num2 and it is not less than num2, well then they have to be equal. And so the third message we see here under the final else is num1 is equal to the value of num2. If we make the values of num1 30 and num2 30, what is the output from the code? Here are two different kinds of decision logic. On the left, we see a radio button box. In this case, we can only select one color for the font. It will need to be blue or green or red or black. When we have this type of logic, we would want to use if, else, else, because it can only be one of those alternatives. The box on the right, however, for text formatting, bold, italic, and underline, well, it could be that we don't do any formatting to the text, or we choose to do all of them, or maybe just one, or a combination of two. These are really independent of one another. If we needed to code the logic for this, it would be a series of 3 individual if statements. If bold is true, then bold the text. If italic is true, italicize the text. If underline is true, underline the text. Let's recap. Selections and decisions allow us to alter the sequence of statements in a program. We do that in Java using if or if-else, and we can nest those statements inside one another to make the multiple alternative if, else if, else if, else. This allows us to skip statements in a program or choose to execute certain parts of the program based on a condition. And with if, else, if, else, we could select among different alternatives, like choosing the font color for our text. Now there are a few other alternative decision structures in Java, and we will not be covering them this semester. These are the conditional and the switch. But don't fret, there isn't anything you could do with conditional or switch that can't be done with if and if-else. And so we want to master the if and if-else, and we will be doing just fine with our decision logic. Happy Java coding!